Once again, good afternoon, and welcome back. I've had the pleasure today not only to listen to Jack Welch, but be able to sit in a few panels, and it has been quite an enjoyable opportunity. We thank both the participants and our speakers for adding to this great event. I'd also like to thank our sponsors. I take this opportunity. Both Marriott and Liberty Mutual have been very helpful in making this event a high-quality event that it has been today. It's my great pleasure to reintroduce Dean Lou Lateef.
Thank you, Mike, and congratulations again, first on that splendid introduction, but also he and I worked on a script that was just magic and unfortunately didn't get used. But I did want to congratulate Mike and the team again for a remarkable day. All the comments I hear from our guests and visitors and alumni have to do with the quality of the school as reflected in the students who are here. This is a wonderful place, thanks to all of you. And I was joking with Mickey, it's the test of our success is that none of us who once studied here could get in anymore. And I think we're almost there. In any event, this afternoon you're in for another wonderful treat. The keynote speaker now is Mickey Drexler. He's chairman and CEO of J. Crew. Fortune magazine describes what Mickey has accomplished at J. Crew as competition-crushing results. Mickey assumed the CEO role in 2003 when he was brought in from the Gap, which he both ran and revolutionized. Under his leadership, Gap expanded to include Gap Kids, Baby Gap, Gap Body, Old Navy, which he invented, and a reinvented Banana Republic. Mickey Drexler is the ultimate retail innovator. He had worked at Gap since 1983. A lifelong apparel industry guy, he was first hired into that business as a Bloomingdale's merchandising trainee. Over the next decade or so, he worked for both Macy's and Abraham & Straus, and in 1980 was recruited to be president and chief executive officer of Ann Taylor. Mickey was born and raised in New York City, but we forgive him for that. He attended the Bronx High School of Science, received his undergraduate degree from the State University of New York at Buffalo, and then while working various jobs in retailing, earned an MBA degree from Boston University School of Management. Having received his master's degree here, his success was then assured. Mickey Drexler has an incredible nose for the apparel business. He's my poster boy for what I call informed intuition. He knows the competitors, he knows the suppliers, he knows the designers, he knows his employees, he knows fashion, he knows his customers, and he knows what some people call retail entertainment. All skills not taught in business school courses, I'm sorry to say. If the art of business is having a sixth sense about business, Mickey is the ultimate artist. He's popularly known as 7th Avenue's Prince of Merchandising. On his watch, J. Crew is growing remarkably and is the retailer the whole world is watching. Year over year, same-store sales are growing in the high double-digit rates, and the privately held J. Crew, as rumored in the business press, may one day go public on the strength of Mickey's results. I'm very proud to count Mickey Drexler as an alumnus and more proud to have him as a friend. In his comments today, he's encouraging us to ask questions, so the microphones are still here, and we'll do a format not dissimilar from this morning's conversation with Jack Welch. So after Mickey makes what opening comments he chooses to, please feel free to fire away at him. Please join me in welcoming Mickey Drexler back to his alma mater.
Thank you, Lou. I mentioned to the dean that when I was here, it wasn't such a distinguished school. And it's really nice to see and again, I think a lot of business is leadership, and this is not sucking up to the dean because I don't have to, but But I think what the dean has done here over the last number of years has really been incredible. And he made a comment at lunch, which I wasn't aware of, in terms of the most successful graduates, which is really more than counts in where you get your degree. It's what you do with your degree, which has always been my own personal feeling. So congratulations, and I know he's built a really great institution here, and that's very exciting. And the building doesn't make it great, and the building is great, but I think what the people do who lead it make a difference in the world. What I'm going to say today is not the opinion of the management, because I'm just going to talk about, I've been out of this place for over many years, too many years. And I've learned a lot, but every year the reason I like what I do is I keep learning more. By the way, we do have 4 distinguished visitors from the J. Crew stores, and you have a student here, Tracy, who also works part-time in one of our stores, so they're visiting today also. And also, just not out of modesty, but the fact is in any organization, the leader usually gets the credit or the leader gets the discredit. The fact is the leader is responsible. I always wondered when I was a young person why when I read the business magazines, they always talked about the CEO, and I never really understood it because, for my own sense and ego, I had an important job, whatever it was, at any level in the organization. But actually, it's about leadership, and it took me probably 25 years to realize that. But it's really important that the leader have the right team who responds well and helps run and build any organization. My assigned topic today is innovation. And I looked at it, and as one of, Tracy mentioned, not to get her into trouble, it looks very textbooky. And how does innovation increase growth? I don't have the letter, by the way, Mike, I'm sorry, but how does innovation increase? How do you manage innovation? And I said that, and this is all personal experience, because I might be in a unique business, but I don't think I am, because all I deal with every day is customers, which is what we all deal with every day. At the end of the day, I work for the customers. They don't work for me, and I'm available to the customers. We had a chat at lunch about trying to call CEOs today, and it's pretty difficult to get through to most CEOs of most American companies, and it's not a pretty picture. And I think it's really important. And I always suggested to the various students I might speak to, try to do that as an exercise. Try to get through when you have a problem with a product, then you're a customer. And I think it says a lot. And why do I deal with all the customers? For 2 reasons. 1, respectful. Number 2, if I deal with it, then everyone else in the company knows it's the rule to deal with it. In any case, innovation is something that I've always lived with without knowing what to call it. I listened briefly in one of the panels before about being in a position of control, and I think a lot of you most of you who are going out again into the work field will probably not have the position of control that someday you'd probably like to have. And it also depends on what all of you would like to do. I don't know. I'm not familiar with business school studies today, but I suspect it's much different working in a very large company. I call most of them bureaucracies. That might not be kind. Some of them are not, but a lot of them are. And you might work in small companies. I think the most important thing in getting out is who you work for, what you learn, and more importantly, what you don't learn. Because I started running a company in 1980, Ann Taylor, and I was kind of youngish, and fortunate, youngish. That was young now, as I look back. But I think you kind of move up the ladder, and remember what you're thinking is true about your boss. And it took me many years to implement that thought, because I get my real readings from people today, not from who they work for, but who works for them, because those are the only ones I trust. Just as when I was a young person in business, all of us young people spoke about who we worked for, and we gave the best reviews. Because a lot of people you work for in large and small companies are very good reporting upward. There's someone who was made a CEO of a very large, very visible public company in the last few months, who will remain nameless, who some of us know very well. He's brilliant at dealing in bureaucracy. And what does that mean? He got a great job. Again, he's made a lot of important strategic moves. He had all important titles. I came close to hiring him about 1.5 years ago, and I did a check on him only because I knew his boss well, who ran the public company he worked for. But when you reference someone today, and I'm not sure where I'm going with this other than saying you're going to see certain things in life that 20 or 30 years later are actually what the real thing is. But when I called his boss, I need a favor, tell me, it's former boss, tell me about this person because we're a little suspect and suspicious. Everything looks personal. Well, we got the true inside story. We didn't hire him, but he's running a public company. What I'm saying is a lot of what I do, and I didn't trust my gut as much as and I think the dean was saying that, a lot of what I do is based on intuition, experience, wisdom, lots of failure, and hopefully a bit more success. And I paid my dues like everyone else does, unless you're going out like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs into the garage, or Bill Packard, and most people don't do that. Mere mortals don't really do that, and it's always nice to look at who does it. But I think the first few years out in the workforce, and most of you probably worked, you're going to see certain things that look right. I saw people, and we chatted a little, taking notes at the marketing meeting. And I kind of used to take notes at those meetings also on the panel. The one thing I didn't hear at the marketing meeting was one word, maybe I came in late, was emotion. You're talking about marketing, and for me, I talk about emotion of how a customer feels about a product. I think if GM had a little emotion in its DNA, and Ford did, and Chrysler did, I think they'd be in a lot better shape. But so when I talk about marketing, it's not the way, and marketing is a very popular subject today. I think in business schools, along with lots of people wanting marketing jobs, but we all define it differently. So it's a long way of saying I've been around, I've been running companies since 1980, and I've learned a lot, but I still go to work every day at J. Crew, learning and having fun. I just went to Chestnut Hill this afternoon, and we're starting Crew Cuts, ages 2 to 8. Will be launched in April. Little crew, J. Crew, Crew Cuts. And I went to look at the space in Chestnut Hill just to see where we make the investment. Why? Because we're a small company. We did $932 million last year, which compared to my old job was 15 or 16 billion. We act small, we think small, and I think it's important to be small. I know a question was asked this morning I heard about big versus small. I love small in America. I think Jack Welch loved big, if that's what I heard. But I also think that big gives you enormous resources. But what I like in America in business, or any business, is small business units, ownership who loves what they do. All the successful companies that I see around America are not, and this is my own opinion, are not run by bureaucrats. They are run by people who love what they do, who are very passionate about what they do. They come to work every day trying to do better, which, by the way, I define as innovation, believe it or not. Every day we run J. Crew, we try to do better than last year because all of us in a public company, we happen to have the luxury of being private for the next maybe few months. We've registered for an IPO. And being a private CEO is just a little more fun and easier than being a public CEO where a gun's to your head every day, even during the gap early years of turnaround, you have that gun. But, you want the gun at some point so your shareholders remain somewhat liquid. And when we go public, therefore, we have liquidity, we have to pay off our debts and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I live and thrive, and our company does, on changing for the better. Everything we do is, what can we do better? How do you hire creative people? There's no rule. I kind of say you see it, you feel it, you smell it. I don't know how to say it otherwise. I'm on the board of Apple Computers, and I've been on the board for about 7 years now. And you don't see a lot of, research, and I know some of you work for consultants, and some are consultants. You don't see a lot of anything but pure, devoted passion, smart people committed, and extraordinarily focused on what they do, and very innovative. And of course, you've got to be smart and figure out what the customer wants. I don't know one business in the world today, actually, that cannot be innovative and survive. Drug companies, needless to say. Car companies, look at examples, and the dean used to work at Ford Motor Company up until he came here. And I think they're all tragedies. And I've been saying that about GM for 20 years because, in the New York Times last Sunday, there was an article about how do you fix GM. One person out of 6 or 7 experts said the product needs to be better. Well, I don't know what a customer does when they buy a car if they're not looking at the car, the product, the quality of the product, the styling, the detail, and the make, which is all the product. But, and yes, there are healthcare problems, but don't let that mask the problem, the product issues. Yes, there are union issues I assume they deal with. Don't let it mask the product issues. On the other hand, being sympathetic to GM, I don't like big, because when you get big, it's really tough, and the enemy is compounded growth that Wall Street requires. You know, I don't follow Microsoft. I assume it's a great company. The stock's been flat for 3 or 4 years, and what can you do after you've done that? You know, you just have a certain practical level of hitting a wall, which a lot of big companies do. I faced that at my old company where we went from 400 million to 15 billion in about 18 years. We invented Old Navy, we redid Banana, we started, you know, kids and all that. And then at some point, there was no stores left to open, but we continued to open stores. We continued to go to certain countries overseas where the returns on investment were below getting a good CD in America when you pay the kind of rents and social costs that they might require. So I think one of the issues on GM or Ford is the size of those companies. Now, GM has a host of other problems in terms of what is GM? It used to be Ford. No, that's Ford. Chevy, Pontiac, Cadillac, and I don't even know who they are anymore because they always talk about themselves as GM. When I went to Ann Taylor in 1980, we were taken over, which is why I quit, by a big, slow company called Allied Stores. And they wanted to say Ann Taylor, a unit of Allied Stores. And I said, you can't do that. And that's a marketing question. Does anyone know why you can't do that? It's like when I left Gap, they said Banana Republic, Old Navy, and Gap now will share the same credit card. I would never do that. The board wanted me to do that at one point, a lot of points. I said, you cannot do that. Customer wants to feel each and every business that is appealing to them, I think, again, my opinions, is a business that people are getting up every day thinking about how to do it better, and that we're all devoted to making, whether it's Ann Taylor or J. Crew, better for its customers, not a division of. Now, part of it's personal, because anyone who's a division of, in my mind, means there's no ownership of the company. It means that everyone every day, and I don't know if this is true or not, for me it was, I always worried what the CEO would think when I was working in a company, no matter how big or small the company was, because the influence of a CEO is felt so strongly through most organizations. And so I like small units of business. I'm having a lot more fun in a, what was a 500, it was actually used to be about 800 million, then it went down to 600 million, and now it's back up moving again. But I have a lot more fun paying attention to our customers, visiting stores, looking at where we make our investments in real estate, and there's nothing like getting burned in a business to grow from your burns and learn from what happened in a negative sense. So all this to say is that innovation is part of, I think, any company's DNA. It has to be. Every day you do things better. If I go to Chestnut Hill today, you see things to do better. You know, we're opening a kids store there. We have a lot of space that used to be a kids store, believe it or not, 7 years ago. We were putting a very small amount of inventory in, and when a customer walks into a store, a hotel, or restaurant, you have one shot at them. In fashion, usually you have more than one because they keep coming back for some reason. In restaurants, a bad meal, it's over. Hotel, a bad entry or bad clerk at the table, it's over. So in visiting Chestnut Hill today, it's a matter of filling the store with more goods because it was a much bigger space. I think then we would have known about had we been in 770 Broadway, which our headquarters are. So my learnings from business school, and I do thank the business school for one other reason. You know, serendipity. I met the recruiter from Abraham and Strauss for a summer MBA program. He was here. He's paying. By the way, I grew up in the Bronx, which those of you, anyone from the Bronx here? Because if you are, it's different than New York City. New York City is Manhattan to the rest of the world, and then there are those borough people, which is kind of like, and you all know it's different. So, but they had a position, good summer job. They recruited up here. It was in New York, and so that's how I hooked up with my first job, which then I fell in love immediately with the business. I also worked for Gilchrist and Company here. I don't know if anyone remembered that. It went bankrupt a million years ago, and I worked for the executive vice president of merchandising. He fired me. And by the way, it's actually good to get fired at times. He fired me because I go in, and I didn't do much all day. He and his secretary, well, there wasn't a lot to do. You knew the company was going to go bankrupt. He and his secretary would mostly talk about, I think it was the Dartmouth game that Sunday, and that was the conversation. And I used to get the daily figures every day, put them on my desk, and I'd look at him. He'd say, "The figures, please." I'd give them to him, he'd give them back. And then at the end of the day, one day he asked for them again, and I said, "I threw them out." He said, "You threw out the figures." It's a true story. I said, "Yes." I said, "They sit here, and at the end of the day, he couldn't believe I threw out the figures. It was Christmas break, and he said, 'Don't bother to come back.'" So, there's all, but I wasn't right for me either. When I looked for a job, JCPenney said that the one advice I got was, if it doesn't feel right, don't take the job, and I went to work for Bloomingdale's because it didn't feel right at JCPenney. So I'm going to open this up. I'm going to open it up for questions, but I think the message I'm giving is there's a lot of practical things out in the world that happen. There's things you're thinking, and believe me, in our company, you know a lot more about most things than the management knows, in a sense. I go to the stores, and Pam Welts, who's our number 2 sales, she's not here today. Pam works at Chestnut Hill. She's the number 2 associate in our company in America. And remember, the number 1's in a store in Manhattan where all the volumes are always off the wall because there's a different currency in Manhattan. It's just totally different. But it's important to know and ask, and go in and ask the team. I had breakfast this morning with a few here and others. What can we do better to run our business? And that's really the advice I give. Now, you will not be in that position until you kind of get my position, but it takes time to get there. In some unique cases, it doesn't take that much time. It takes a lot of drive. It takes a lot of focus. Then you have to decide what you want to do. I never said I wanted to do what I'm doing today. I wanted to make a nice living. I wanted to feel good about what I did, and I wanted to have fun. And at some point, 10 years out of graduate school or 12 years, because I never set my sights, and I think today it's a lot different because this was a long time ago, but I never really set my sights on the ultimate where I'd like to be or how big the business should be. And people, at Gap, we had this plan when we hit 12 or 14 billion. One of my operating partners, he had the $30 billion program, and he kind of went public with it, which I found embarrassing because it doesn't matter how big you are. It only matters how good you are. It doesn't matter, and how profitable. And by the way, in terms of money and profits and everything else, like this morning I said, how much volume are you doing? What are your comparable store sales? And I explained to the team, I said, the ticket to fun in American business is making money. Now, some people can figure out how to have fun while not making money. I've never been so fortunate. But it's all about money, which someone told me when I was a really young person, and I thought it was a gross statement. And now I find it's true. Because if you make a profit, a return for your investors, a return for, we're owned, our majority partner is a private equity firm, but when you make a profit in most cases, you're just happier and you can do more and have more fun. However, as an investment banker friend said to me, who recently retired, their job, investment bankers' jobs, are to take conglomerates and deconglomerate them. That means, I guess, undo them. Like they're saying to undo Time Warner, which I personally agree with. I'm not sure what a huge company like that gets out of having not a hands-on, experienced management in each company. And then, so take a single company, have them acquire other companies. At lunch it was mentioned, which is always the case. The dean mentioned very few acquisitions in America. Was that ever pay off? How does it continue to go on? It's beyond me. So you have these monstrous companies. And I guess maybe GE is different. On the other hand, and I would never want to debate Jack Welch, so I'm glad he's not here. But I think when it's that big, I contend that if NBC were owned by an individual management with stock and ownership, it would be twice as good as it is being run by a large company where it's meaningless. When I went to Ann Taylor in 1980, a friend of mine said to me, "What is the earnings per share of your division?" I said, "What are you talking about?" And I didn't know. I was 35 years old, and I should have known, but it wasn't like it is today. I got 1,000 stock options. I was thrilled because I got a raise. I could afford to buy a little apartment in New York. And then I understood a few years later, actually years later, the EPS meant a lot because my division was kind of meaningless. Ann Taylor was a $25 million business. Then the irony is it became worth more than the whole corporation in a number of years. But that's why I like small. In my business, small is much better because you can be a hands-on merchandiser. You can pay attention to the customer. You can respond to each complaint or each whatever. So, but if I look at all the big companies out there today, I don't think they're as efficient. The excuse for GM is when you get a 50% market share, there's only one way to go. As a friend of mine once said to me at the Gap, unfortunately he was right. He was a partner at Goldman Sachs, and they love to prey on people and buy, sell, do this, do that. He said, it's over for you. It's the peak. Your multiple is 42. The company's growing like crazy. He says, enjoy the time because you're going to get too big, and then what are you going to do? And it happens to every company in the world. Now, the only one it hasn't happened to, which is astounding, and I've watched the Apple thing, it's been an extraordinary phenomenon, is the iPod growth, which I was at a board meeting on Thursday at Apple, and it's just extraordinary what you see. It's a once every 100 years kind of phenomenon. Of course, it kind of becomes the standard in American business. How do we create apples? But, the iPod. But you do that through a great amount of emotion, a great amount of innovation. It's all innovation. In fact, the iPod lineup for next year, which I can't tell you about or I'll be killed, is it's pretty incredible and exciting to see. So that's kind of my background, my history. It takes a long time to learn. I'm an older guy. I've learned a lot, and I keep going to work every day learning and learning and learning. I'm learning about smaller stores. After all the years I've been in the business opening stores, smaller is beautiful. More narrow is beautiful. Focus on your assortments. Don't go overseas because it's the next thing to do. The other last comment on companies I find with conglomerates, selling off, buying, a lot of CEOs who do that kind of retain their positions a bit longer because you don't have to be accountable until you kind of embrace and reorganize and restructure with your latest acquisition. So anyway, I've covered a lot of ground. The innovation thing, it's biblical for me. It's biblical in any business in the world, I think, and I don't think anyone's exempt from that. But I don't know if that explains what it means. So you might have questions about that too. And can I have my Diet Pepsi? I know you're not a Coca-Cola brand, but I found out. I wondered why there's no Coke in the building, but it's $10 million a year is the answer. So, see, it's all in the money, right?
Hi, my name's Jesse. I'm a first-year student here. I wanted to ask you about the growth of the Gap in the 80s and in your career and sort of when you realized that you were onto something special and what about what you were doing was different than all your competition.
In the Gap, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. Again, so much is the individual, and I think we all have a certain DNA that we're given on, and I think the key is to match your DNA to the opportunity. Now, I spent 12 years hating my department store jobs. You remember, 12 years. I loved my first 3 years. I was a buyer at Bloomingdale's. Loved it. Gap was interesting. I looked around. I was, you want the whole story? Personal and all that stuff?
Sure.
Okay.
Please.
I'll tell you what happened. I ran Ann Taylor. I was 35 years old, and a friend of mine said to me, an older, wiser, richer, much richer friend, said to me, I turned down the job as president of Ann Taylor. Why? Because I was kind of comfortable. I was the vice president of a $500 million business, and Ann Taylor was a $25 million business. It wasn't in those days it wasn't like the contracts you see around today. It was a fair raise, but that wasn't it. I turned it down because I didn't love the management. It was Garfinkel, Brooks Brothers, Miller Rhodes, companies you never heard of, take us, they're all out of business. Department store business is kind of a defunct animal. And they owned a few, Catherine Stout's shop, which is still around. And I turned it down. He said to me at dinner one night, I said, I don't know what to do. I hate my job. There's the third new CEO's in. This is at A&S. I don't like what they do, and, yada, yada. I don't want to move out of New York, yada, yada. So he said, I'd rather be president and CEO of a $25 million business than have the number 2 job in a $500 million. I didn't even have the number 2. I had like the number 6 or 7 in a $500 million business. And the next day I called back. The guy said, I'm going to take the job. It was that simple. And I said, you know what? Thank you for your advice. And he's not my friend anymore, by the way, just as not for any reason because of that. So, so I ended up there. And you have a picture in your mind of a business, and I didn't know it. A lot of it for me is you process information. People ask me, how do you know what Gap's going to look like? How do you know what J. Crew's going to look like? We're starting a new company in this August. We're opening up 3 new stores. It's a dream concept. We're not doing it because we have to grow, which I like. Now, I always say in the retail business, when companies go overseas, or they start new concepts, it's time to sell the stock because it becomes growth that might not be as profitable. We're starting a new company in August. It's a photograph in your mind. It all begins with something in your mind. When I looked at Gap, I had a list in my drawer when I was thinking of starting a company. I couldn't start a company because I had a mortgage. Actually, I had 2 mortgages. I was always house poor when I was young. So I had an apartment mortgage and I had a weekend house mortgage. If you live in New York, of course, you become weekend house poor also. And I had 1 kid at that point. So I couldn't start anything, and I would have had I'm a conservative person, even in business. I'm very conservative. So I made a list of products I think a store should sell. This is before I went to Gap. It was a list of 20 items, which I still keep in my drawer. And I said, these items at the right price and the right style. Because I always believed, when I went to Ann Taylor, one thing I learned is style shouldn't cost any extra. In the 80s, if you wanted something nice, it had to be expensive. And I think in the last 20 years, the entire world has become a taste-style world to a very large degree. And I always think it was, but more and more. People loved Fords and Chevys and Buicks when they came out every year, years ago, but things changed. Now there's none of that annual car change thing. And by the way, I think if they did it, they'd increase their sales in car business. Every year make it to do on a new design. But when I went to Gap, essentially the list of 20, Gap had 420 stores. So that was good. It was a horribly, ugly, awful business. That was good. But it had great real estate. It had a name that was famous that they were killing, and they had developed 10 brands. And when I got there, it was a miserable first 3 years, I must tell you, because I was young. I hated being out of New York, and it was very tough because culturally I used to have an office at 57th and 5th, and I was sitting in Colma, California, looking at a highway and a cemetery in an office building. And that's a tough thing when you live in Manhattan and you grew up in the Bronx and whatever else. So I went there and just had a picture in my mind always. And then you move forward like this. Now, I didn't know this when I was there then, but you don't listen to half the things you hear. Anytime you have a good idea, most people will tell you it doesn't work. Gap kids, it will not work. They argue. My own company argued with me. They argued on Old Navy, you can't be in the discount. I said, it's not the discount business. It's cheap, cool clothes. It won't work. Nothing, but if you have a good idea, most people quickly say no, don't listen to most of them. But when I went to Gap, I was very focused, and I paid a personal price. I went through a lot of very emotional, difficult times. I commuted. It was very hard, and getting used to living. I don't know if anyone from San Francisco? It's like living in a different planet if you're from New York. No, really. It's not like New York or the East. It's different. And everyone said, have a nice day. And isn't it a nice day? The weather's nice. So I had enormous, but that's what happens there. If you live there, right? I'm not exaggerating. So my wife and I both had a very difficult transition culturally. And, but every day you go to work and you say, this is what I'm going to do. In fact, I know at times I would call my wife and say, I just told the founder to go F himself because I have to take the markdowns. I said, I don't know what to tell you, but I think we might have to move back to New York. But he didn't care. He just wanted to make money, so it was okay. I was told not to take markdowns my second month there. If you have stale eggs and milk in the supermarket, you better get them out. When I got to J. Crew, I couldn't do due diligence. I made an investment in J. Crew. I wanted to have skin in the game, as they call it in the business. And I couldn't do my due diligence because there was a CEO and a management team, and Texas Pacific was nervous that I might tip them off. So when I got there, the first week I went to the distribution center. By the way, everything's detail in the world. If you don't pay attention to the detail of everything, you don't know anything going on because 10 lieutenants will tell you something else. So I went to the 2 distribution centers. We have one in Virginia, one in North Carolina. And lo and behold, there's piles of inventory up to 6 years old. Well, I paid a certain price for the company. We valued the company. And they were nice. We revalued the entire company within a few months. Why? Because it was old inventory. Old inventory in fashion or in anything is bad inventory. And if you're running a business, you probably know more about EBITDA than I do in finance. but our company was run for EBITDA. At Gap, it wasn't. We're a publicly traded company. We had to liquidate all the bad inventory, create cash for the new business. And you can't compromise on branding and marketing. It's consistency. It's never changing that grill except in touches like Mercedes and BMW. And then you look at, do you know what a General Motors or Ford grill looks like? So got there and had a picture and stuck with the picture through thick and thin. Got my ass kicked on Wall Street the first 2 years. I don't know if I'd want to do it again because it was a very painful couple of years. But I don't know if that answers the question. But you do have a vision. And it's a long question. But is that...
I mean, that was good, but...
Interrupt me, by the way. You got to interrupt me if I'm going on.
No. I guess what I was trying to say was, when did you kind of know that you had a different perspective than your competition and that what you were doing was rolling?
You know, when you're young and nervous, it's different. I was a relatively young CEO running a company, and I was a little nervous. I never had an objective perspective, and even now I really don't at J.Crew. I think we're doing really well. The customers love us, but I never really, I'm always running, I always run a little scared. Because every day they can tell you we have markdowns in the stores today, that some things are a mistake. We don't buy enough of the next thing. But I don't think you ever really get that comfortable. I watch Steve Jobs because he's just a smart person to watch. Or I watch the other guy who sits next to me at the board, he runs Genentech, who's smarter than all of us times 10. He cures cancer. And it's never a matter of being, gee, we did it. It's always a matter, they run scared every day. And part of the thing is if you're easy about it, you can't be as good as you are. And I don't know if I drive the people too hard. I'm always very reasonable in my own impression. I'm very thankful for the team we have. But I don't think you ever really sit back and say, we got it. And when you have good business, here's the problem in being a public company or even else. We're up against this first quarter, I can say because it's public. I don't know if you know what a 38 comp means. You all know. 38 comp and a 61 net margin, comparable store sales. That's what we did first quarter of 2005. We have registered for an IPO, and now we're kind of watching, but we're up against one of the most perfect quarters the world ever had. And you know how you get measured on the next quarter? Only against the last quarter. That's part of being a public company. How did you do versus last year? Not the quality of your earnings. How did you make the money? How do you do that? So I don't really ever feel that comfortable. I think we're doing really nice things at J.Crew, but it's not like we're there. Because if you lay off for 1 minute, a friend of mine is the CEO of a public retail company, had a personal tragedy in his life. He laid off for 3 months because he was dealing with his personal tragedy. And the business kind of went to hell for 3 months. The stock lost 40% of its value. It's merchandising. The stock lost 40% of its value. He came back with a vengeance, and now the company's flying again. But it was a 6-month kind of break from the intensity of it. And when it gets better, you work harder. It's just the way it is.
Thanks.
Okay. Next. All right. Just cut me down on the. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Mickey. My name is Mccutcheon. I'm a first-year MBA student, and prior to entering here in the fall, I was an associate manager at the Westport, Connecticut, and Greenwich, Connecticut stores. And currently
J.Crew?
working. Yep.
I was there yesterday.
Yeah. Oh, very
Both
nice.
of them.
Very nice.
Cool.
And
We're
I'm
putting
currently
kids
working-
in Westport and Greenwich also. Just a little advertisement. Go ahead.
And I'm part-time at Chestnut Hill as well.
Oh, cool.
So I definitely want to commend you for what you've done with the organization, as I've witnessed it firsthand to an extent with the transition. And one thing I wanted to ask about was kind of future strategy a little bit. Certainly with bringing in the special occasion area of the business, bringing in crew cuts now, having that as a full line, you're bringing in new customers to J.Crew with those lines. And one opportunity that I've seen speaking with customers is still within the men's business for J.Crew. And I've had gentlemen just come up to me in the store and say, you know what, I'm just disappointed. I was at J.Crew years back, and I decided to come back, and it's just, the styling just isn't for me, and I just, I don't understand. And, there have been comments to me about, the size of the men's area in the catalog, or the percentage of, the area within the store.
So your question really is an opinion that J. Crew. No, I know. Most questions. So is it to the question being, how do we?
Kind of,
what's
yeah,
wrong with it?
Yeah,
If something's
not
wrong.
necessarily, just customer perception, which is important, and I know you're very big on customers. And what strategy would you entail on, changing those people's minds?
Okay, that's a good question. And at lunch we had an interesting, very private discussion about that. See, here's the facts of the men's business. By the way, men, if you want to be in the apparel business, personal opinion, not the opinion of management, don't go into the men's business, okay? Why? Go into the beer business, go into the truck business, go into the sports business. Men are unemotional about clothes. You are raising one of the more important, and the stores know it. We talked about this morning at breakfast. The men's it's public. It's less than 1/4 of our business. Now, J. Crew was founded by Emily Woods, now Scott. She kind of wore men's clothes. She's still on the board, and she's still a major investor in the company. But Emily, it was like a men's company, not a women's company. This is another long answer, I'm sorry to say to you, but here's the thing with men. They hardly shop. More than half, and you can debate this in the stores, more than half of the men's goods are bought by women. They don't like to take risks. It takes 3 or 4 years. Like the guy, it took 7 years to stop wearing pleated pants for guys. It did. It took that many years. But we are doing a number of things. One, I'll tell you, I got there, men's was 40% of the real estate, less than 25% of the business. And now I think we could have been smarter. What you're saying is, first of all, I never disagree with any customer. It's funny when you complain about something and someone says, well, you're the first one who ever called to say that was wrong. You put you on the defensive. If you say it, it's the case. Here's what's going on at men's. We're in the process of turning around the perception, but the perception relates more to the reality of what the stores look like and the assortment. We made a lot of mistakes. On the other hand, it's still growing, but not as rapidly as women's. Women shop, 70 to 80% of the traffic in stores is women. Just think about these statistics. 40% of our real estate was, and this is business. This is not fashion. This is pure, unadulterated, looking at the numbers of a business. 40% of the business allocation was men's space. It was less than 25% of the business. And of the 25% of the business, the fourth quarter, without the fourth quarter holiday, when they finally decide to go shopping 3 days before Christmas, without that, it's below 20%. So already, and one thing I've also learned is when you're going with the wave, swimming with it's so much easier in life. When you got that thing going with you, no matter what, it's easier. Men's, you're always swimming upstream all the time. They don't shop a lot. They buy the same thing all the time. They replenish the same thing. 80 to 90% of the guys in this room are wearing a version of a blue shirt, a khaki pant, and so what we've done is, we're really dealing with this issue. We've taken men's out of 3 stores in the company. Why? The return on investment, at the end of the day, when we are public or private, you know what our investors like? Profit. They like stock prices. At the end of the day, women's is twice as profitable, more than twice as profitable per square foot of space as men's is. So there's actually a business school issue. If you are us, it sounds like a chain of stores. If you are us, you have to figure out the investment you make. I try to teach our merchandisers that they're not buying a pretty bottle or a shirt. They're taking investors' cash, and it works because we take cash and we buy inventory. Just like a hedge fund person or a stock investor, a finance investor buys a company to get a return. We get 2.5 times the return on women's versus men's. Now the question is, do we have a better use of our funds without alienating our customer? If we say, get out of the men's business, which we've done in 3 stores, guess what's happened in all 3 stores? Someone want to guess? I'll tell you what happened. Whatever we lost in men's, we picked up plus 20 or 30% in women's with a higher margin in 10 minutes. Now, these were smaller stores. Chestnut Hill's 11,000 square feet. I'll tell you, it does $2 million in men's. In space, that should do, what, $3.5 million? I'm not exaggerating, right? It's a big space. It's 2 stores. We used to have a Crew Cuts there that took over that space. So we're doing that. In terms of the actual product itself, what we've decided to do starting right now is have value for men. Men think anything over $40 is expensive. And it was the same way 30 years ago. And I looked at the industry, and the trend in menswear is going down in every company. Like Gap, I watched that, and I didn't act quickly enough at all. Because Gap, basically, you get the women's business going and the men's thing keeps going down because it's much more profitable. Guys don't shop a lot. They buy very narrow assortments. So you'll see in J. Crew a great khaki assortment, a great hab shirt, no dress shirts. We loved thin ties. It was like a great trend. Cool guys are all wearing them. No one bought them last year. Did you selling in your stores? They didn't buy them. Thin ties are very cool. It goes back, but 3 years they'll probably be ready to buy them. So we're doing sweatshirts, hoodies, and we're trying to fix it. In the catalog, whatever pages we give, we're over-investing in men's. So I don't know. In fact, we had a discussion this week. Do we need men's in the catalog or just be on the internet? It's all about allocation of resources. We're putting crew cuts in our stores. Why? Because we have space in our stores. We have a lot of extra space, and it's a matter of productivity. So does that answer it? Or we're in the process of trying to change it, and it's going to take some time. But I do say we have the best khaki assortment in the world. And as an associate, you've got to tell people that. You know, that's part of you're a marketing associate at J. Crew. Okay, so.
No problem.
All right.
Thank you.
And if you have any more, just call me in the office, okay? Or if you have any suggestions, by the way, call me. All right, next.
Hi. I'd like to thank you for coming over here. And I have a specific question for you. How do you create a brand in a retail business, retail apparel business, and how do you make it sustain and last for a longer time?
So how do you create a brand
Yes.
and make it a better business? Is that what you said?
Yeah,
Make it
Make
last.
it last for a long time.
Okay. And, well, that's a really good question because most brands don't last for a really long time. Other than Louis Vuitton, Gucci, Hermes, it's all about the integrity of the product. And always knowing how much you can grow and how much you can't grow. For example, at J. Crew right now, how do you create a brand? You've got to get people who love what they do, and every single day they love that brand. I know it sounds sick, but that's it. You know, Ralph Lauren loves Ralph Lauren, and himself along with his company. Every day, he's involved and passionate about what he does. Phil Knight at Nike, yeah, he hired the new CEO. I was shocked that he hired him. I don't know him, and I don't know Phil is the CEO, but I read the CEO's background. I said, what does he know about sneakers? You know what my daughter said? There's no press in here, are there? This is off the record. My daughter said I was replaced at Gap. I had a big fight, and it was over. I didn't want to do certain things. It was okay. It was the best thing I've had. My daughter, who was then 10 years old, said, but it's nice they hired someone who runs a theme park, but what does he know about clothes? And you know something? I read article after article today about what do people know about the businesses they run. Now, Terry Semmel at Yahoo, who's a friend of mine, said, I can't believe you're going to do this job well. He's been extraordinarily successful and very unique at doing something he didn't really do. If I'm going to have surgery, I hope I don't need it, I want someone who did the operation 1,000 times. So making a great brand is always related to an individual. It's never not. It's always, and the individual markets it, and they sell it, and they involve in the design of it, and that's how you nurture a great business. They also know when enough might be enough. Like J. Crew, we're looking at it. I don't think it'll ever be more than 300 stores, or else we have to lower the quality of our offerings. And now when you're a public company, the problem is they're looking for growth. So right now we're in a very nice position. Has it last? We have 158 stores. We can probably go to 250 or 300 stores comfortably. We have 45 factory stores, which, by the way, the most profitable business anyone can be in is factory. Low cost, high margin, quick turns, yada, yada. So we probably can go to 100 of that. That'll keep us very busy for the next 3 or 4 years or 5 years. Then we're starting crew cuts. I don't know how big that'll be, frankly, but I think it's a good add-on. And then we're starting this brand new brand. But I think you got to live it, breathe it, and not lose the edge on it. And that's why I do what I do. I could never do, for example, what Jack Welch does, as I said at lunch. He could never do what I do. Because it's just, for me, what I like to do is kind of nurture and be a policeman or policewoman on all the stuff that goes on in our business and hire people who respect what J. Crew is. I know it's only clothes. I always say the guy sitting next to me Thursday cured cancer. Heck of a lot more impactful. But I think anyone who runs a great business, whether it's Nike, you usually look at a few people behind it who feel it, and then you bring in professional management to it. Is, again, not the opinion of the management here, mine. You bring in professional management who doesn't have the feeling and the passion about a business. They can't do it as well. The networks, all the early pioneers in the networks were Golden Sin or Paley or whoever it was. They were the ones that built those companies. Now you have conglomerates running a lot of things, or you have very creative management running things and not professional managers. Now, I think professional management is fine in its place, but when you have an emotionally connected brand, and I think the big word that's always left out of marketing is emotion. You know, why are iPods so good? You got MP3, you got all the, why they're beautifully designed, although the article in the Times today was not very kind about their quality. I don't know if anyone read that. Beautifully designed and innovative, and they stand behind the passion of that every day. Johnny Ives is a brilliant designer who works there, and you should see, he's a freak on the dial. Now, I respect that. A lot of people at my board, old board and new board, they say, well, what's the difference if the cashmere's from Italy or from... There is a big difference in the eyes of the beholder, and the consumer always knows. It's amazing how they know. That's it? Okay. You had another part, but I don't remember what it was. Okay, that's okay. Good. Okay, yeah.
Hi, I'm Catherine Kirk, and I took my MBA in 2005. And I was going to ask you how you stayed in touch with what the customer wants, and how you develop and create trends, and how you get the feedback from your staff, which is in the stores, up to you. I think you went into some of it.
Wrong word, not up to me.
Okay, up
It's
to your
not,
team?
No, it's not up. It doesn't go up. If they feel it goes up already,
Okay,
Got
so
it.
that's the
I'm
whole
picking on a
customer
little
relationship and the emotion that you're trying to drive. I
Right.
mean, do you drive it down into the consumer land, or is it coming up to you, or how is that all?
well,
how
you
do
know,
do
it's
that?
interesting. I don't know. You know, if you ask, the ultimate judge on any leader is the people that he leads or she leads. That's the ultimate judge. For me, I don't do consumer research. I went to Ford Motor. I was saying this story. I went to Ford Motor Company in 1994, the Dean's old company. We invented Old Navy, named, by the way, after a bar in Paris. It's still there on the Saint-Germain. I had the biggest fight with people on my board. You can't name a company Old Navy. I said, sounded good to Maggie and I were in Paris. We were going to the airport. We registered the name. This is all exactly as it happened. We actually were inventing Old Navy. Why did we invent Old Navy? This is our research. Because Dayton Hudson, then now called Target Corp, was starting a knockoff of the Gap in 1993 called Everyday Hero. Went to Mall of America to look at it because we were feeling the pressure of growth in 1993. Remember what I said? Don't try to grow it too big. You grow it down. We were feeling the pressure in 1993, and I went to look at it. I said, gee, there's a really bad version of Gap. They copied all our fixtures. It was ugly, this, that, and the other thing. Went to Chicago. In all our secondary locations, my own brand, it's personal to me again, not the opinion of the management. I didn't hire someone to say, is there a market for Old Navy? I went out and looked at our stores and said, why can't you sell anything at regular price? They said, they love the Gap style. It's too expensive. Now, I thought Gap after Ann Taylor was cheap. 80% of the jeans in America were sold in 1994 for less than $30. All the Gap jeans were $35. I said, oh, my God. And we're a good jeans company, and we don't have that marketplace. Gave 10 people in the company $200 each when I got back. Said, go out to the discounters, Walmart, Target, buy clothes. I assigned categories to who I thought might be the demographic. They came back. We had a meeting. About 2 weeks later, I said, put all your stuff out and tell me how you spent the money, because that was my research. Now, focus groups, I've sat through one or two of them, and they get the regular people who come, and for $50, they give you the same answers they gave for Pepsi, Coke, it doesn't matter, whatever. So that was the thing. We said, wow, this is a hunch. You know, that all our stores are saying we need cheaper versions of Gap. I figured Target did a lot of research. So they're saying you need a cheaper version of Gap. It's common sense. And, you know, sometimes you're wrong, by the way. I was wrong on a startup. You get right, you get wrong. And then our shoppers said, and then you know what you got to do? You sit back alone and you say, I'm going to go for it or I'm not. You speak to a few people who you kind of want to listen to. And then we started Old Navy. The week before it opened, my chairman walked in and said, you can't open this company. The margin's going to be very low. I said, of course you plan low and over-promise, you know, under-promise, over-deliver. He says, you can't do this. What I do, I cried. I said, my life is in this thing. But we opened up Old Navy. And I was, by the way, the point is, the store in Paris, I had to hire 2 naming consultant companies to satisfy the board of directors that Old Navy, they didn't want Old Navy. They said, get another name. If it's in your mind, when Phil Knight started Nike, or Steve started Apple, or whoever does whatever, Yahoo, who would name a company Google? It's brilliant. If you went to a board of directors and you asked 10 people, even in this room, get 10 of you in a room with a creative, innovative idea, it doesn't work in committees or groups. So you sit back on Old Navy and you say, do I do it or not? Then you measure the finances. We had huge cash. We could afford to do it. My board supported a startup. And so then you do it. Now, if you're talking about how we do research, every Monday, now Tuesdays, we have 150. I'm in the stores. I was in 4 states this week. Not because I do. I was in Las Vegas, Seattle, L.A., San Francisco, then Westport and Greenwich yesterday. I had to go out and look at some real estate. I went to an Apple board meeting, yada, yada. And I went into the stores. And the stores know what I always ask is, what can we do better? That's a start. Like I'm hearing, I know we can do men's better. But we're on that. We're trying to fix it. So when you say how it comes up, I call every customer. I email every customer who gets to me. Company policy that day. And if someone doesn't return a call that day, they're in trouble. In fact, one of our new people didn't return a board of directors call in 2 days. Director calls me saying, is he stupid? Because even if he doesn't want to return my call, you do it because I'm a director. But, some people work in environments where that's not important. So I don't know, does that answer it or?
Yeah, yes,
okay,
thank you.
But it's really keeping your eyes and ears open, listening on the phone. I go to our Lynchburg facility. I'm absorbing all day. Plus, I have a really good team of partners in the company. They all, by the way, handpicked from my old company. Remember, we had a $15 billion company. You're doing a little turnaround startup investment, and you've worked with people from 5 to 15 years. I wasn't doing J.Crew without Jeff Feifel. Why? Because he started with me 12 years prior, and I said to the investment bankers, or the private equity, Texas Pacific, I'm not coming without Jeff. They said, well, and I personally, because I invested in Jeff because he had some things tying him to the old company. I hired Tracy Gardner. They all know who I'm talking about. Tracy Gardner brought a whole team of people over who I knew I didn't have to wait a year or two because the company was sinking. We didn't have cash. We were losing a lot of money and so on and so forth. So I think consultants in research, stylistically, we all have a different style. We have consultants in our company dealing with some back office IT issues and things where we have absolutely no expertise. By all means, bring someone in. But if I have to hire a consultant on customer taste, I went to Ford, this is what I was saying, 1994, Old Navy, we wanted a pickup truck. So I got an appointment with the 2B CEO because a friend of mine was on the board of Ford. So Jeff Feifel and I went, we just started Old Navy, it was a year old, like extraordinary success. He took us in, showed us around, and I went to the design room of a car company, which I was excited to see. Had all these cars there, just like you go into our design room, you see all the clothes. These are cars. And first showed us the color palette. 1994, the color palette was for 2001. What do you think of the colors? They said, now Jeff is one of the best color people in the world. You know all those colors you see in the store? It is so hard. Anything that looks simple is always difficult. The most simple things feeling are difficult. I cut something out, a little black dress. They said, whatever looks simple in the world is always difficult. iPods, very difficult. They look simple. Simple is beautiful. So I said, how do you know what's going to sell in 2001? He goes, oh, our color research surveys tell us that. Okay, then on the floor, I'm making this is a long afternoon short. He has, I don't know if anyone knows what the guys know what a short bed pickup truck is. They're very popular today, I think, aren't they? This is 1994. He has this little pickup truck, really cool. And I said, that's got to be a 1 million unit seller. I assume that. I don't know. Is that a lot for a car, 1 million units? It's a lot. And he said, we're not doing that car because our research said it won't sell. While I assume Toyota and Nissan and everyone else was saying, the research, you got to be careful on that stuff. You got to be careful. It's very hard to see around the curve. Most people who are successful in the product world see around the curve. In my business, you got to, rear view mirror is one thing, but it's always what's happening, not what happened in the past. And I think really good leaders. Apple doesn't do research, for example. Now you could say it's right or wrong or whatever. They just don't do it. We don't do it on that level. My old company does it like crazy. They told them to do this. They tell them to do that. A customer in fashion. Now we're talking about clothing. You all know. You all shop. Who's going to tell you what color's good next year or what silhouette's good next year. We took the V-neck sweater, we lowered it by a half an inch. #1 sweater. You can't find that out other than through having a talented design team and good instincts. Next.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Poland. I'm a first-year student here. And I just had a question for you about growth. You seem to have a bit of skepticism about that. And I wanted to ask you, is controlling J.Crew's growth part of your strategy? And is that sustainable if you do go public?
You're saying growth, I'm skeptical, meaning worried or no?
You seem to, with...
Big. Oh, to get too big?
Yeah.
Okay, well, big, it's all relative. You're saying, so are we concerned about growing too big? Yes. Or what about the growth?
Are you concerned about just setting a limit on that growth?
Yeah, well, here's how it works. I've said this. We're a $932 million company today. I'm very happy. When Gap was 900, I was happy. When it was 2 billion, I was happy. When it was 12 billion, I was starting to be a little unhappy because I didn't see creatively or strategically where to go. If you look at the specialty industry over the last 20 or 25 years, which is how long I've been in it, you will never see a company that kept growing without having, look at Limited. It's been a flat no company for 20 years. Now, he did great things by doing Bed Bath or Victoria's Secrets or whatever he did, but there's no apparel company left there. When I think the time is know when to get out, know when to reinvent, know when to give it up. In apparel, I think it's hard to keep it going because by virtue of size, you're less cool. By virtue of ubiquity, you're less cool. By virtue of seeing it coming and going, you're less cool. So I'm not worried about growth right now, but I have said to people in the company, they know it, I said, when it gets too big, I don't want to be the CEO. Because then I'm going to stop having fun. At this point in my life, I've earned a lot of right to have fun and enjoy. I do have a lot of fun now, but there are certain things, and I don't know how many people have ever said, you know, the company's too goddamn big. Why don't they split up Ford, GM, General? They ought to split up Gap Company. They ought to split up Time Warner. Give ownership to small groups of individuals. The synergy, the energy of a turnaround or a startup does not work in large companies because it's slow, it's lethargic, and I've worked in large companies. Trust me, even my own company, my last owned company, we were so big that you couldn't be nimble. I would go travel and I'd see that we opened up a store 7 minutes from another store, and then you say, who did this? Someone did it, and you're responsible for it as the CEO. Now, I paid the price, which is okay, but I think that you keep doing it as long as you can do it well. And then maybe you sell the company. There's always the greater fool theory. There's someone always buying. No, you call the investment bankers, they'll get you a good price, right? Now, remind me, I tell my friends, I shouldn't say my friends on the board because you're not supposed to have friends on the board. I tell members of the board, I said, remind me when it gets too big. Okay, because, here's what happens. The reality is your multiple, and those in finance know this better than I do. On the growth, they go wild over your multiple. And then when you hit those figures, they say, oh, we're disappointed. Look at Google. Anytime you hit it, they're disappointed. I used to see Gap stock. Every time we had an earnings plus, the stock went down. I didn't realize that that's how it works. So that's my feeling about growth. If this new startup is successful, and I don't like to say it will be or won't, that'll give us another. I just want to have fun right now, and I want people to make money. And as importantly, I want to take the team and have them take it over. And for me, I just, I kind of take it a step at a time on that.
Thank you.
Last question, because I think I'm running well over.
Sorry, I apologize. I hate to be that guy, but
no, you're the man. It just no pressure. Better be a good one.
All right,
no,
I'll try.
Okay.
I was wondering, like in an industry like fashion, where ideas and innovations are, somewhat easily replicated in terms of product or promotion. How do you see J.Crew or any other company successfully leverage innovation as a competency against competitors?
First of all, how I see it is only by those of us that come in every day. For me, for Jeff, for Tracy, for Liz, I'm going to name the whole team, the drivers of our company are about innovation and design. It's about evolving, cutting the edge, but not too sharply. As you evolve, I think it's always having, kind of design and evolve as you go. But I think it's all, as I think Lou talked about, the car dealer. that was an interesting story because he said two things that really were important. One is that usually the bigger it is, the less customer satisfaction it is, and I totally agree from personal experience. And number two, it was in, what was his name? It was in Bob Tasker's head. Now, that's not to sound arrogant, but you can look at clothes and anything else, and everyone's copying everyone else in this world. It's wild how the copying goes. I think you just have to make sure that when you hire, by the way, in our company, as a policy, because I want to remain small, interview every single person who comes on board in our headquarters office. You have about 400 people, from janitorial staff to receptionists on up. I have to approve. The ones who get away with anything they want are IT people because I never understand a word they're saying. But otherwise, and I meet them, and I say, I don't know what to ask you. I say, what's a good question? They always give me a good question. I ask them. I don't know what the answer means. But I think that as long as you kind of feel, and there's this get-it factor in the world, and people in business schools, I don't think like to admit that it exists. But there's a get-it factor on design. There's a get-it factor on merchandising. There's a get-it factor on emotional and in marketing. And I think that as long as the company has people who understand that and value that, innovation as a key premium competitive advantage, I think you're going to win. And so I don't know if that, but a lot of it's, if I look at you or look at any individual I meet, you have to feel a certain thing about them. Whether, and in a designer, the most difficult people to hire in the world are designers because I don't want to say they're not usually verbal. They're not very verbal. They're extraordinary internally in what they're thinking. The woman that runs women's design, Jenna Lyons, has been with the company 15 years now. She's one of our most important assets, and I tell her this every day. Now remember, 15 years of good clothes, really ugly clothes, and really good clothes. So, but you have to kind of know and feel it. I assume it's not much different than if you're in the music business or the movie business, which I don't understand at all, but there's that certain thing you'll never learn in school, and I think the dean said that. I learned structure in school. I learned process. I learned some finance. I learned concept. And for me, I also got just better visibility on what the world looks like, and I also had a good network on job hunting, which I thank the school for. But after that, you're on your own, learning from smart, and you will learn from not such smart people always. And remember, you got to be learning every day, and always, if you don't know, find out the answer. So that's on innovation. And that's it. I'm out of here, right? Is that it?
On behalf of the student body here at Boston University, we thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you all. Good luck.